So we're going to talk about fixed assets today. Um, we have a variety of experience. I'm basically going to walk through how it works and some of the setup so that you can see how it kind of rolls together. I have an agenda here. I have a 60, roughly a little more than 60-page guide that I prepared rather than a manual that Amber will have toward the end of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to talk about a couple of things here. We'll look at these first things. GP is set up so that fixed assets, if you want, either through payables or through purchasing, you can bring in by using a clearing account. So if you post everything to that clearing account, you can bring in those invoices as assets. And we'll walk through that a little bit later, but this is just an example. So if it's from purchasing, it debits the fixed asset account from your balance sheet and credits accounts payable. If we're using fixed assets, right, it debits that account. We're going to walk through because I have some examples of that and I have some of that. So here's the difference. If we use a true clearing account, you'll see the debits now to the clearing account, the credits to accounts payable. Then when you record the asset, it debits the asset account and credits the clearing account, thereby wiping it out. And then this just walks through the other scenarios. So with that, I'm going to actually bring up GP. So in general, if I were going to enter an asset from scratch, under cards, there is general. And I'm just going to pull like we entered it. There's a bunch of assets out here. And you have your asset ID, your description, whether it's type of property, so it can be new, used, or leased. Property, whether it's personal listed, real. And then you have a fiscal location. You have an asset label if you want. Structure, we'll get into that a little bit. Manufacturer's name. Manufacturer's name is where you have serial number, model number, warranty information. A lot of this is in the handout you'll get, but I'm going to touch on it. Acquisition date, acquisition cost, a location, and we'll walk through some of those. And quantity, last maintenance on the item, and the date it was added. If I click the go to up here, I can go look at what the accounts are. So that's an account group, and we'll talk about that. But those are the default accounts. You'll see you have an expense, reserve, prior year, the asset cost, proceeds if you sell it, gain or loss, recognized, non-recognized gain or loss, and clearing. Then we also have the book tab. So the book, when I pick my book, and we can have 3 types of books, and I'll get into that shortly. I'm just going to pick the internal book. So you'll see it has all my depreciation information, what I'm depreciated through, beginning of the year cost, the cost basis, the yearly depreciation, the current depreciation for the current month, year-to-date depreciation, which is only for the current year, and life-to-date, which is a life of the asset, and a net book value, what methods you're using. So under depreciation methods, you have a lot. Straight line original is what's used the most. 200% declining balance is makers. And there's even older stuff there, or no depreciation. You also have averaging conventions. And then this will list the original life and then the remaining life. This section's for amortization. We may or may not go into that depending on time. So that is if I was entering an asset manually. So we're going to talk about setup and what the things are that have to be set up in order for fixed assets to work first. So there is, I'm going to look at our account group first. So account group should be similar to the asset class IDs. So we'll look at computer, and these are just the default accounts that posting is going to occur to. There's a class, and that's what we were talking about, classes. Let's go to computer, and you'll see that it actually says use the computer account group and the insurance class. Then there's the book. So the book we have internal, federal tax, alternative minimum tax. If we look at internal, it says what our current fiscal year is. You want to make sure that you're in your current fiscal year. And then depreciation is periodic or daily. And here we're telling it to auto add the book. Then there's very important and setup is the calendar. So this is the default fixed asset calendar. And how I would do this if I was doing this from scratch is I would build the calendar and select the years. Then I also have quarters. I would build the quarters as well. And these are all set up. You see I have a lot of them out here because the calendar was built pretty much for everything. Same thing with the fixed asset calendar. I go back quite a few years on this. So once that done, the other thing you will need to do is set up a book class. So book class is going to explain how this depreciates. So I go to my class ID, computers, and you'll see here's where I select the method. So it's straight line, full period, 5 years. If I went to another one, those are all internal, but there's furniture and fixture is 7 years. Equipment is 7 years. Light trucks is 5 years. And then if I look at AMT, those are using 150% declining balance, which is what AMT is, or straight line when it's like a building like that, and it's using 40 years. And if I go to my federal, you'll see how it's using 200% declining balance, which is makers, and the various different years. The other thing I need to check is my company setup. I need to have a default set of accounts. If I go down here in the lower right, so this is if there wasn't anything there, this is how it would post. But I need to have a default account group. And then there's various different things. I name my corporate book, so we call this internal. And there's various different options. Require an asset account, whether I'm auto adding book, whether I want to post in detail. And then here's the purchasing options I was talking about. So post PM through to FA, post POP through to FA, include the matching invoices, and to delete the transactions immediately. You also have a bunch of user-defined fields available. So some of these are string type text, and others are date. There's some date, and then there's numeric. The other thing they have available that you can use is insurance. I don't see this used a whole lot. It really just says what your rate of inflation and depreciation is. It's just giving it a class. Some of that's on your handout. If we have time, we'll look at the guide that you're going to get. I'll go through some of that real quick. Lease company, if you're leasing, I could set up a vendor. Don't see that used very much either. Location. Location I do see used. So we're going to use the first one, an example of Alpharetta, Georgia. So this will allow us to run a report by the location ID. It also has a county. Some states require assets to be like segregated by that, especially like Florida and Texas, where they don't have income tax. So that's more of a tax thing, but they have that. Then I also have a physical location available. So the physical location would be like building 1, room 100. So I can also segregate by that. I see that used more than I see location used. And then the purchase posting account is that clearing account we were talking about. And that's how it knows where to post to, the offset. We also we went over the quarter from the other calendar. There's retirement codes. There's some that come with it. You could set up your own. So casualty, donated, exchange, lost, sold. Structure. I don't see this used a lot, but this would be an example of structure. Right? It's almost more like departments. And then you have some user preferences. If you actually had imports or things pointing there with some macros. So that is some of the setup. I want to go back over to each area here and let's pick an asset. So I'm actually going to pick by the asset ID, and let's pick the PC. So I have an extended description that I put in here besides the PC. And you'll notice it's got a bunch of different information here. If I wanted to put in a serial number, model number, warranty date, I could. There's a verified date and PIN. Some of these expansion things contain information. There's an assessed value on location. That's just our quantity, and it tells what our beginning quantity was. Last maintenance is, I could put down the dollars that it cost. And then this was the date the asset was added. You'll note it's not necessarily the acquisition date. On this particular asset, they're saying it July 1st of 2025. From here, I can go to whatever else I'm using here. You'll see this asset pretty much is just, there's our account group. So these are the posting accounts for that. And then our book information, which is really the key information. So if I look at, well, let's look at federal. So you'll see that depreciation based on 200% declining balance. I'm going to clear that and then flip to internal. So there's internal, and you'll see the depreciation is different. There's also an ITC button here. This is where your section 179 or any ITC is. The module works pretty simple. I'm going to also see if I have a smart list out here. If not, I'll try to build a quick smart list. If you go under fixed assets, no, we don't. So I always like to build off this book because I can get some more information in here. So suffix you could have, if you were trying to associate this with one asset, you could have different stuff in the suffix. I am going to add a few columns and show you fairly easily how we can get some other things in here. So my cost basis, I'll leave my suffix for now. And then I want my depreciation to date. Original life in years and days. Current run depreciation. And I need my depreciation in here. So I need my life-to-date depreciation amount. If I take my life-to-date depreciation after my cost basis, let's make that a little less, but if I look at this, I like this better than some of the canned reports we're going to look at, because I have my cost less my life to date equals my book value. So it's a quick little report that I put together. I do a little more than this, but and I'm just going to add it as a favorite, and now it's under there. So that's a quick way to get a report. Also look at the reports that come with the system. So there's an activity report, and there's a fixed asset to general ledger reconciliation report. This is supposed to add up and equal your GL account. I'll show you the sample. Asset activity. So that shows what's occurred with an asset. There's also a depreciation report, and I have choices whether I want detail or some other options. I'm gonna go ahead and print that to the screen. So that gives all the depreciation on the asset. There's what they call a fixed asset inventory list. This just kind of lists all my assets, costs accumulated, net book. I like my smart list better because it exports out to Excel and I can sort it however I want. The other thing that I want to talk about, so we talked about if I had this link to purchasing, and I don't have anything up here right now because I don't have any invoices in there. But there would be a little window up here that I could pull open the drop down and it would show my invoices that were out there. That is on your handout. The other things I want to show you that I know for sure are depreciation. So I can depreciate all my assets. I have to tell it the internal book, and then I have to tell it what period. So a lot of this data is in 2027. I'm just going to jump out to that. If I said I was doing March 31st of 2027, and I went ahead and hit depreciate, it would process. I also have the ability to run a projection before I do anything. So I could say, again, my depreciation is in 2027, April 30th, and I just want my internal book, and I could run a projection. And then this projection report that's out here, I don't know if there's data in this or not, but we'll take a quick look. There's not. So let's try real quick running the projection. And I'm going to run it for all assets. And you'll see the green bar zipped, and that should be done. And we're going to bring back up our projection and try that. And now you'll see there's actually data in there. So it tells me what it's going to do with each asset. So I can look at my depreciation before I do it. Then there's also, I have the ability to depreciate one asset. So if I was going to depreciate this one asset, I highlight what book, put the date, and then I can either do one of two things, as you see back out here. I can depreciate it, or I can project it and run a projection only. GL posting. So when there's stuff out here now, I can say this is a test, and I have an option. I could select periods. So I could say that's my period. I could insert that. I also have the ability to select a source document. Let's see. It doesn't look like there's any out here, probably because of the data, or an asset ID. So I could select a specific asset, or a class ID. I could run a class of assets. And then it'll put the information down in this bottom window, and this post will light up, and I'll have the ability to post it. The other thing that I want to touch on is retiring an asset. So I could pick this asset and say, on this date, so we'll go to 2027, and on April 1st, I'm going to say I had a casualty, and I could go ahead and put an amount or quantity in here, and if I hit retire, retirement completed. So that asset is now not on my list. They have a neat little feature here called Retire Undo. If I come back and I take my asset, undo. Now if I go back here to retire again, it's on my list again. So if I make a mistake in that instance, I can go back. There's select assets where I can create a group. So I created a test group, and I have 24 assets in it. How does that help me? Well, it helps me in the fact that even when depreciating, if I take all assets off, I can do my group. So if my group is only a few assets, I can do a group. The other thing I didn't mention on here is I can reverse depreciation. So if I run my depreciation and my month's not closed yet and I review it, and I didn't do a projection and I find a mistake, I can come back and reverse depreciation. I'm going to save a couple of these other things for in a little bit. We talked about those posting accounts, creating that. We talked about posting from AP. Actually going to pull up really quick. The guide that you're going to wind up getting. So this kind of walks through what we've just been looking at in a lot more detail. There are a couple of things that I wanted to show you, which I'm going to get to. So this even goes into detail about the clearing account, insurance class records. Just bear with me for 1 minute and I'll get to where I want to get to. So depreciation methods. So I have here for you what the depreciation methods mean to find out. For all of them, same thing with the averaging conventions. I go through all of the averaging conventions for you. And there's one thing that I'm looking for. Bear with me a minute. This talks about physical locations. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I had my email still up. That's what I want to talk about. So, reset life and reset year. If you change your place in service date, it's going to yell at you and give you a little error message. So I'm going to pull up an asset and try to change its place in service date. And you can see what I mean. So if I say, you know what, that was 2/1/2025. Right here, if I now make that February 1st, and I try to save that, you're going to get this message. You have changed the depreciation sensitive field. This will result in values being recalculated. That's what this is talking about. So reset year, you have three options: reset year, reset life, recalculate. Recalculate from the beginning. Reset is recalculate from the beginning of the year. Reset life is recalculate as of the place and service date. That's usually what you're going to want to do, but you can also recalculate the depreciation from the depreciated date forward, so it wouldn't touch any of the prior depreciation. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to point out to you that was specific before I get back into a couple of other things. This will go into some of the ITC and all that other stuff. That's the groups we were just talking about. There's some month-end procedures that are listed on there and year-end procedures that I think I'm going to let you read on your own. This talks about the posting information to the GL. All right, back to this. So I'm going to say no there. I'm going to clear this and just close out of this. Put this back to 1/1. Clear that, get out of that. So the fixed asset reconciliation to the general ledger. I would try to get a smart list created and not use this report. There are a lot of things that can cause issues with this report, and the only way to fix it is going in, unless Microsoft goes and fixes it at some point, is going into the tables in GP and fixing them. And what happens is there's inevitably something missing in here that doesn't show up on this report. So I'm just pointing out that I don't particularly like that report. So back to a few other things. So I also have the ability to do a mass change for a group. So that would be, I could say, I want to change my asset class ID, my location, any of these things. I want to change my account groups, my book. I can actually change like a depreciation method. So I have the ability to make multiple changes. I also can do a mass retire. Same thing, it's based on that group concept. I think I covered all of that. There is actually a year end to run, so just be aware of that. And there's a couple of different ways. So if you were starting out with this, I'm gonna go see if I have that real quick. Not gonna have it on that drive. There's a template that we can give you for fixed assets that we normally give you. See if I have a blank template around here. I do. So as a sample or example, we would not expect you to key in all your assets, nor would we want to. So there's a couple of different ways. If you have Integration Manager, it's easier. If not, there actually is an import utility. But typically, this gives you the length of the fields, the types of things. So we kind of lay this out for you to make it easier. And then the asset book has different information. So I wanted you to be aware there's an import on that as well. And then let's go back here. We talked about the year, and this is the other tool I was talking about. It's a utility to import. Those are the main things. I think that is what I have for you in general. I just want to glance at my agenda real quick. The one thing we didn't look at is inquiries. There are some inquiries as well for fixed assets. Very similar to what we were looking at, but there's actually a projection inquiry. If we've run a projection, I think we may have on a one asset. I'm just going to say from 1 to 12 and period 2027. You're going to make me switch it the other way. So there's the two projections that were run on that asset. So I can pull that up through an inquiry. Financial detail, I don't know that there's any out here. but we'll try to pull the first asset. Oh, there is. So these are the postings, and you can see cost, clearing, depreciation, reserve, what it hit when from a data standpoint. Let's see if one of the other assets that I believe was a little further out, like maybe the PC. Oh yeah, so the periods were 2025, even though the transactions date are 1985. Just bear with, that was demo data. I could do a book comparison. So that's kind of nice. If I take my PC, there's the difference in depreciation based on the books. And then, of course, I have my just regular book, which is the same thing we were looking at in cards. If I pull up my computer asset and tell it internal, except I can't make any changes in an inquiry window. And then retirement, we're going to look at asset 5 because I think it was retired. So you'll see it was a sale. So they sold the asset. Purchasing transactions, we don't have any, I don't believe. But this is the table, and this is what you would see if I had some data out here. That's what I talked about, would be at the top of the general window. So that's what it would look like. Again, it would show right above this asset if I actually had it and was in cards. And then batches. And it doesn't look like I have any information out there on that. But that's kind of a quick, I wanted to leave some time in case there were questions. That is kind of a quick run through of fixed assets. It's not a real hard module. Most of the stuff imports, and then going forward, if you get in a monthly routine, it's fairly easy, and then you can track your assets. I guess with that, Amber, we can open it up and see if there's any questions.
All right, thank you, Mike. We do have a couple of questions. This first one says, how do you assign a default expense account to a custom group of assets?
Well, it's really assigned by the class. So if we go back over here, when I talked about setup, this account group is your default. So for computers, for example, there's the default expense account. And again, so that works based on the class, right? So if I come back to computers, you'll see the account group for that is computer. If I hit the hyperlink, it takes me out. Hopefully that answered that question.
All right, awesome. The next one says, why in the fixed asset smart list are there fixed assets with a cost basis of 0? Are these inactive assets? If so, how can you edit the smart list to include only active assets?
Okay, so going back to the smart list, that's just because I'm limited in time of what we can do here, but I did save it out there. That is pretty easy. So what I didn't do is I didn't put any kind of search parameter in here. Of any kind. So one of the things I can do is I can say, first of all, you know what? I want a book ID and I want it equal to internal. So I only want to see the corporate type stuff, not the tax stuff. And then I can limit it any way I want. I could say, you know what? I only want to see assets with an original life that contains 07-000. Let's see what that does for us. It doesn't like the 07-00. So let's just do internal that it should like, and it did. So if I have cost basis of 0, I could just say in my search, cost basis not equal to 0. And now it came up and there's no zeros in there. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a few more. This one.
Okay.
If I want to enter fixed assets into the module that are in progress and not depreciated, how do I transfer them to a new account to be depreciated once they're complete?
So you're really kind of talking about construction in progress. Typically, if you're building an asset, I would leave those out. If you remember when we looked out in that purchasing transactions, I would either leave them out here and not pull them in, or I would probably use some sort of different clearing account than the main one, and I would probably set these so they're not placed in service. So if we pick an asset, right, and I go to my book or anything, they're just not in service. There wouldn't be an in-service date yet. I probably would set them also to no depreciation and come back and switch that back. So there's a couple of different ways. It really depends. We don't have enough time now, but to get into more detail. But you could always email us a question or your account manager. But those are a couple of different ways to look at that. Another question, Amber?
Yep, we have a couple more and they keep rolling in. So just so everybody knows, if we don't get to you today, we'll be sure to reach out to you within the next maybe day and a half or so. So don't worry if we don't get to you. But the next one says, can you undepreciate only one item? They say they might have missed that part.
Yes. So if we go back to undepreciate only one item. No, I don't think you can. You could technically. It's not easy, right? But I could set up an asset group, right? I had 24 in this. I could set up an asset group with that one asset and reverse the depreciation on it. And that's actually what I would do if that was the only one that was wrong. Or you really could reverse the depreciation on all of them, right? As long as no posting has happened. I could actually reverse it on everything, fix the one asset, and rerun depreciation. So those would be the two ways I would address that. What else, Amber?
Okay, next one says, we want to depreciate one asset to several different expense accounts. How do we do that?
So when it comes up, you can't. It's going to want to go to one expense account. When your GL posting comes up, you should be able to adjust that down here. Remember, I said you're going to get a bottom window with information, right? If I pulled and said, let's look at period 4, and we'll call this test. And I don't know whether there's anything out here or not, but there are no transactions matching that. Let's try period 3, and if that doesn't work, there is stuff. So I believe No, it's not like going to let me add here. I would have to look into that. I don't know. I've never had anyone post to multiple expense accounts. Right? Because it's not really letting me change anything down here. So I would have to look into that one.
Okay, and we do have your contact information, so we'll be sure to get back to you on that. We have time for one more question, right, Mike?
Yep.
Okay. If we choose to reset life, reset year, or recalculate, will that be recognized in the fixed asset GL posting window, or do I just need to make an entry to the GL to update that?
So it depends if you're posting for a period that you already did and is closed already, you're trying to adjust for that. It's not going to go back and make an entry for that. If you're posting forward or you haven't posted for the month and you made a mistake, then it would pick it up. So you're right in the other case that you would just have to make a journal entry if it was like a prior period. All right, I'd like to thank everyone for their time.
Thanks for watching. To learn more about our products, visit www.crestwood.com. Hope to see you there soon.